Welcome to another episode of the Everything College Basketball Podcast, your home for the latest news and analysis from the world of college hoops. Back again are your hosts, Josh Burton, Phil Dexter, and Peyton Burton.
What is up, you guys? Welcome back to another edition of the Everything College Basketball Podcast, episode 130. I'm, of course, your host, Josh Burton. Joining me yet again today are a pair of my teammates, Peyton Burton, Phil Dexter. And before you both speak, raise your hand if you had Clemson 7-0, leading by unanimous two-game separation the ACC Conference.
Well, I'm not going to raise my hand for that because I didn't predict that. I think I had them close to like 10th or 11th in our conference preview for the magazine. But I will raise my hand and say I did predict them to pick Duke or beat Duke this week. So I will raise my hand on that. But as far as them being 6-0, 7-0, what the hell they are, and leading the ACC conference, I mean, they're actually a good-ass team. And I mentioned to y'all, they're a lot better than I anticipated coming into the year.
Yeah, I think they're a lot better than pretty much everybody anticipated. I mean, I don't think that anybody really can claim that they had them, leading the ACC at this point in the season, especially not with a full two-game lead. Still a long way to go in the ACC season, but, Brad Brownell's done a heck of a job so far to probably get himself off the hot seat there at Clemson.
Well, and it's even crazier the amount of guys that they lost that was quote-unquote their best players, but it opened up spots for other guys. Like Tyson Hunter has been outstanding. He's a mismatch nightmare. We're going to talk all about Clemson. They got a big win yesterday against Duke, 7-0. We will talk all about Clemson. But today is a big show. Before we get into all that, got to remind you guys that this podcast is presented by House Enterprise and in part with the House of College Hoops. Head over to our site, house-enterprise.com for more information. Also, got to shout out our title sponsor of Everything College Basketball this year, Beauty to Beast Nutrition, located in downtown Edinburgh, Indiana. It's a healthy juice bar. Got everything you need to make you feel good without the normal jitters and crash of sugary drinks. Stop in today. Tell them ECB sent you for an entire 10% off of your entire purchase. We mentioned episode 130 is a massive episode. Earlier this last week, we pre-recorded a couple interviews that you will hear throughout the course of the show. The first one being Jonathan Warner of MakingTheMadness.com. We talked to him about bracketology, how the bracket's shaping up at that point in time back on Thursday. And then also we have a pre-recorded interview with the Hall of Famer, the United States Basketball Writers of Association, Hall of Fame legend that's covered Kentucky, Louisville, and Indiana sports, working for WDRB.com as a sports journalist for decades now. You will hear our interview with Rick Bozich. Incredible interviews. And also later in the show, we'll be joined again, like we were last year, by the inventor of Haslametrics Analytics, Mr. Eric Haslam. It is a loaded show, fellas. I cannot wait for everybody to hear all these interviews.
Yeah, me too. Just real quick before I forget, the reason I want you guys to know the reason that Duke lost this week is because it's Coach Shire's fault. So I just letting y'all know there, it's Coach Shire's fault. He did it on purpose. He lost, so blame Shire. Hashtag, let's get this trend going. Hashtag fire John Shire. Am I right, Stephen Decker? Hopefully you listen to this.
Well, and also we are on the Twitter, the YouTube, and the Facebook. If you're not following yet, go give all of our links a follow. If you're joining us live in the show this morning, afternoon, drop a comment. We'll do like we always do, post them, react to them, and all that. But fellas, before we get into the Jonathan Warner bracketology talk, I do want to I mentioned Clemson at the top of the show. We will get into their big win over Duke at home, in which they have played well. But a couple topics just real quick I want to discuss before we get to the Jonathan interview. Let's talk some conference standings, how they look right now. And we mentioned, again, Clemson. Brad Brownell, if I can speak, got his 400th win yesterday in the win over Duke. Clemson is now atop the ACC conference at 7-0. Phil, you mentioned the next closest team. There's a list of teams that are 5-2. Clemson, with a 2-game lead in middle of January, the question for both of you, can Clemson hold on and win this conference outright?
You can go ahead and fill with that one.
Man, that's tough. I think it's possible. I think they can. My prediction is that they won't. I just think as they get into the meat of this conference schedule and they run into, the UNCs and the Virginias, I think they're going to run into a couple of losses. Now, obviously, like getting the home win against Duke is crucial. You have to get the home wins that you can get in conference play. I think they're going to be in a position to be in the hunt for it, but my prediction is that they don't pull it out. And I still think that somebody in the group of Virginia, UNC, or Duke ends up the conference champion.
Well, they don't play Virginia until the second last game of the season. They play them February 28th. It is on the road, so they're going to have to win that game. But the next 5 games is all very winnable. They go at Wake Forest, which Wake Forest beat Duke. Wake Forest is a solid team. They get Virginia Tech at home, Georgia Tech at home, go on the road to play Florida State, which Florida State's not been good this year. And they cap up a 5-game skid with going at Boston College. Boston College is pretty decent, but I think all 5 of those games are very winnable. Do I think they'll win the conference? No, I still think that I'm betting on Virginia to hold the ACC crown this year, but it's very possible they could win this conference this year. I mean, hell, they started 7-0, so very possible.
We talked last week a lot about home court advantage in conference play. Look at these teams right now, home records. Clemson 10-0, Miami 10-0, Wake Forest 9-0. You've got Duke and North Carolina 9 and 8-0 respectively. Tell me again how important home court advantage is in conference play right now.
Absolutely. I was talking about this with some people yesterday, but I'm not sure that there's a bigger home court advantage in any sport than there is in college basketball, and particularly when you get into conference play. I mean, you look up and down the ACC, the Big 12, but even down to like the Mountain West Conference, and there's not an easy road win anywhere. It's ridiculous right now, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I agree, especially in college sports and especially in basketball. There's really 2 sports that home court advantage or having the home advantage really matters, and that's in college basketball and European soccer. When you go on the road and you face these tough environments, it's very unlikely you're going to come out with the win. Doesn't matter really who you're playing, especially when you get into conference play. You really need that extra, since the crowds are back and stuff like that. Home court advantage just means more than it probably ever did, and got to win a couple of road games, though, if you want to win the ACC conference, though, so they're going to have to get some done.
Phil, real quick, you mentioned the Big 12. We all agree it's the best conference of college basketball right now. Kansas atop at 5-0. Kansas State finally took a loss yesterday against TCU. We'll talk about later on. But you got a couple teams behind Kansas at 4-1. Kansas State, Texas, Iowa State 4-1. TCU's at 3-2. Everybody else is sub 500 in conference play. The Big 12, like we predicted, will eventually start eating itself up. So when you look at the Big 12 as a whole right now, do you see Kansas able to maybe get a couple game separation, or are the teams like Kansas State, Texas, Iowa State, and TCU going to eventually hang around and be a big threat come the last Big 12 regular season game?
I mean, I personally think that Kansas is the clear cream of the crop in the Big 12. I think it's kind of them. Then there's a pretty prominent second tier. And then I think we're starting to see a little bit now that maybe that bottom tier of teams isn't quite as strong as we thought it was, with Texas Tech now to an 0-5 start. Oklahoma State hasn't been very impressive in conference play. Oklahoma's struggled a little bit here or there. So you have some teams at the bottom of the conference that I think we expected to maybe be closer to 500, as you mentioned, Josh, and are stinking it up a little bit right now. But no, I think Kansas is the clear cream of the crop, and I think they ultimately win the conference by probably 2 or 3 games.
Yeah, I'm going to obviously agree with that. I think Kansas has started very well. They're 5-0 in conference play and easily could be 0-5 or really 1-4. Really the only game that they've looked pretty dominant in the conference play so far is that game at West Virginia. But Oklahoma State game, we could have lost. Texas Tech could have lost. Last night against Iowa State definitely could have lost. And Oklahoma, they had us down dead rights, down 10 points with like under 3 minutes to go, and we came back and won that game. So we very well could be sitting 1-4 in conference play, but we're not. I agree with Phil. I think Kansas is the cream of the crop when it comes to the Big 12 basketball, and I think they'll win it by a couple games. They got 2 tough games this week, though, that very intrigued and very excited to watch this week.
Well, I do have to say I was impressed with the guts that Texas showed last night. They were down 10 at one point, right around halftime against Texas Tech at home, and Rodney Terry got that turned around. They played a much better second half, won a tight game. I do think Texas, talent-wise, is probably not too far off of Kansas, but I'm just not sure that, the difference in coaching, no offense to Rodney Terry, but Bill Self is if not the best coach in America, then among the best. And you see that play out in close games consistently. So I think that gives Kansas a big advantage there as well.
And real quick on Texas.
Well, how about this, Phil? Go ahead, Peyton.
Texas. Before the Texas Tech game, they played a tough TCU team. TCU had them down like 20 points before, and then they ended up storming back and making a comeback and ended up winning that game. So I think they got the toughness and I think they got the talent to compete. It all comes down to coaching.
Well, my point on that too is ever since we talked about it last week, the Chris Beard situation, ever since Rodney Terry has taken over at Texas, they are now 7-1. Like, that doesn't happen a whole lot when you have a scandal like this, a changing of a head coach, and the team continues to fire off well. This team is tough-minded. They are built. They're obviously playing connected together. Texas is still a real threat. They're still a real threat. But let's move real quick to the Big East because we got to get to this Jonathan interview. The top of the conference, Xavier 6-0, Marquette Providence 6-1. Then the two quote-unquote favorites coming into this year, Connecticut, Creighton, both 4-3. Creighton's playing better. Connecticut hit that little slump. So what do we make of the Big East right now? And God dang, how good is Sean Miller?
I still give Connecticut a little bit of a benefit of the doubt because a couple of those losses have been, really tough environment, road losses. Not too many teams are going to be able to go into Providence and win. But, you mentioned it. We got to give Sean Miller, we have to give Sean Miller huge props for how Xavier's playing right now. I mean, obviously they won the NIT last year, but they were on the outside of the tournament looking in, pretty much brought back the same roster, a few additions here or there, but they look like one of the best teams in the country right now, not just in the Big East.
100%. Xavier sitting 6th in the conference, would not expect that coming into Big East play, but Providence looking pretty damn good. Them and Marquette tied at second place 6-1.
God, Shaka's doing a hell of a job.
Yeah, Marquette actually plays Xavier coming up in like 8 minutes. They play the noon game, which I'm going to watch on my TV and keep up to date with that because that's a huge game for Big East play. But if you're asking me right now who wins the conference, I do like Xavier, but I'm going with the Friars of Providence. Bryce Hopkins, especially in that game against UConn. I said it the week before and I'm going to say it again. He is the best player in Big East basketball. He is the player of the year in Big East. And I said it last week, I'm saying it again. Love me some Bryce Hopkins and love me some Providence Friars.
It depends on who wins this game. I know it's an easy out, but if Marquette can beat Providence and take sole possession of second place, I'm telling you, I think Marquette ends up stealing this conference because Shaka is coaching on a different level. We know how great defensively his teams are, but it's their offense right now. They're playing free-flowing basketball, fun, entertaining to watch. Marquette's one of those teams, Peyton, we've seen them live and in person against one of the best teams in the country, Purdue, and they gave Purdue all they wanted for 40 minutes. I'm telling you, I think Marquette's one of those Sweet 16 good teams right now. Let's go to the Big Ten real quick. Purdue's atop the conference solely right now at 5-1. You got a bunch of teams with 2 losses. Michigan State, Rutgers 4-2, Northwestern and Michigan are 3-2, and then you got a whole gaggle of teams right at 500. You got Michigan. Well, I guess Michigan's 3-2 as well, but you got Penn State 3-3. Illinois playing a lot better at 3-3. Wisconsin, Iowa at 3-3. Then you got a couple teams at the bottom we didn't expect, like Ohio State, Indiana. What do we make of the Big Ten, and are we still convinced this is Purdue's conference to lose?
Yeah, I don't see a world where Purdue doesn't win the conference. Wisconsin, they started the year off great. We talked about it with Brian Rao for Heat Check CBB. I asked him about them because at the time, they was really the only team that's really competing with Purdue for the top of the Big Ten. Ever since that, they've taken a step back. They lost to Illinois, and then they just got clobbered on the road at Assembly Hall against Indiana. So they got to get their shit together, but Purdue's definitely the best team in the conference. And I'm telling you right now, looking in second place, don't forget about Sparty. Don't forget about Tom Izzo and Michigan State. They got healthy. They've won like 6 in a row now, besides that they just lost to Illinois. But they've been playing well here lately, so don't watch out for Sparty.
Yeah, as Peyton said, I just don't think that anybody in the Big Ten is quite the talent to compete with Purdue, so I think Purdue is clearly the favorite. In that second mix of teams, I still think it's anybody's kind of anybody's race, and it's still going to be a dogfight to see who can, position themselves well for the tournament. I think Michigan State, Ohio State, Illinois, Indiana, obviously all have a ton of talent. but still have a lot of work to do as far as what they've done this season and what they still need to do going through Big Ten play. Curious to see if a team like Penn State can kind of continue to get enough wins here down the stretch to, bolster their tournament resume as well.
We're going to save the SEC conference for later on when we talk about Kentucky and Tennessee. But I do want to ask, before we get to this Jonathan interview, which is a great interview, we know in the Big Ten Conference, the top 4 teams get the double bye, so they don't have to play until Thursday. Right now, just as we sit here on January 15th, real quick, give me your prediction for the top 4 teams that get the double bye in the Big Ten tournament.
Go ahead, Phil.
Purdue, Michigan State, Ohio State, and Illinois. I think that's it.
I'm going to go with Purdue, Michigan State, Illinois, Iowa.
I will say, I think we got the majority of those. I'm going to say Purdue definitely. I think Michigan State holds on. I love the way Illinois is playing since Sky Clark left. Love the way they're playing. So I'll go Illinois third. And I think there's going to be a surprise, and I think it's going to be the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. 4-2 right now. I figured they're going to hold home court more times than not. I think that's enough to get on the 4th place finish and a double bye. But great stuff on the conference standings. A lot of stuff that we probably didn't expect, and there's going to be more when we talk about the SEC. But right now, we want to go to our pre-recorded interview with Jonathan Warner of MakingTheMadness.com. Talk all about bracketology. It's a great insight to what goes into looking at brackets and teams and how they fall. I hope you guys enjoyed this interview, and we'll catch you on the other side of it. Joining us now on episode 130 of the Everything College Basketball Podcast, we're joined by Jonathan Warner, the founder of MakingTheMadness.com. He deals in daily bracketology. It is that time of year where we start really diving into bracketology now that conference play has fully began across the country. Jonathan, it is our pleasure to have you, my man. How are you doing today?
Doing pretty good. Obviously, once we hit into January, the focus starts getting into college basketball and starts getting into the bracketology. So pleasure to be on and talk some bracketology.
Absolutely. And we're probably going to be all over the place because bracketology, especially in January, it's going to be very fluid. You do daily. I'm sure you see the changes from day to day. But I do want to start, it seems like the hot topic of the year right now is the Kentucky Wildcats. Obviously, I think most people have them outside on the outside looking in. I think Joe Lunardi has them currently as the first 4 out. So when your bracketology and your outlook, as they sit here 10-6 on the year, without a quad 1 win, actually more quad 4 losses than they do quad 1 wins, which is wild to say. What is your outlook as we sit here on January 12th of the Kentucky Wildcats tournament resume?
Yeah, it's looking a little bit grim early on in the season. Now, obviously, there's still plenty of time left for them to make a run. They still rate pretty well in the analytic metrics, but right now they just don't have those quality wins. Obviously, when you play in a league as difficult as the SEC is, you're going to have opportunities. So I'm not going to consider them dead by any means. I think if they can rally, put together some good performances, get a win here or there. You don't necessarily have to beat Tennessee or Alabama, who look like they're going to both be on the 1 line. But, you beat an Arkansas, you beat a Missouri, you beat, some of these other pretty good teams in the SEC. I do think they can still rally to make the NCAA tournament. But at this point in the season, I have them, not in the group that's even really, considered to be in the NCAA tournament mix. I think they're, a fringe NIT bubble team right now, but that can of course change if they can, rally. But right now, just kind of a grim outlook for the Wildcats.
Well, we've always been under the belief, because historically the NCAA has shown us this, that if it's close, if it is a close call between, let's say, come Selection Sunday, a team like Kentucky's on the bubble and a team like, let's say Dayton, for instance, I feel like Kentucky would get the favorable option because of the name brand, and NCAA is not stupid. They know who's going to drive the money. So do you feel like, even with not the quad 1 wins yet and all that, but let's say they continue down this path, pick up a few quality wins and are firmly on the bubble come Selection Sunday, do you feel like that they could sneak in just because of that kind of name brand situation over a team like a Dayton or whoever?
Yeah, I definitely think, if they are able to rally here and, start to pick up a few quality wins as the season goes along, I think, if they get into that, I consider like the 13 loss, if you're entering Selection Sunday with, 13 losses, I think if you're in a league like the SEC, like the Big 12, like the Big 10, those leagues that are just, gauntlets most years, you're probably at that point going to get into the NCAA tournament, even with, not a ton of wins. Maybe, Kentucky obviously is, if they are to have that, high amount of losses, they're also going to have a good amount of, quality wins. So I think if they get into a position where, let's say they're 19-13 entering the NCAA tournament, or 20-13 entering Selection Sunday, I think that would probably get them in. But the road to get there involves being some pretty good teams. So they're going to have to, step one is beat some good teams, and then worry about what the NCAA tournament committee is going to do later.
John, I agree with everything you just said, but on the other end, I think Kentucky would be a great 1 seed in the NIT tournament. How about you, John? Sorry, I had to.
What an ass.
I had to. Sorry, y'all been giving me shit about Louisville being 2-20, or what the hell it is. I don't even know anymore. But talk to me. Look at your updated bracket from today. Your 1 seed so far. You got Kansas in the Midwest, Purdue in the South, Houston in the West, and rounding at the East region, you got Alabama. Out of those 4 teams, do you think that those 4 teams are like the best teams in the country right now and can make a Final Four run?
I mean, I think there's more than those 4 teams. I think from a resume perspective, those 4 teams have kind of established themselves at this point as the clear top 4 teams from a resume perspective. But certainly you look at, the 2 line, I think Tennessee, is a really good, dangerous team that can win a title. I think UConn, they've struggled a little bit here of late, but they look like a team that, early on can go win a national championship. Arizona, I mean, I certainly wouldn't count them out to make a run. UCLA is doing pretty good. And, no one in the ACC has established themselves, at least yet, from a resume perspective. But I certainly think there are a lot of teams that are seated a little bit lower that, could make a run and could, potentially get up to that 1 line. And then once you're as a 1 seed, you have a easier path than most. I think there's certainly some teams that currently aren't on the 1 line that could make a Final Four, could win the national championship that we're not even talking about at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel like this year, there's not a great team per se in college basketball. There's a lot of really good teams and a lot of teams that maybe haven't started to hit their peak yet. I think we're set up for a wild NCAA tournament. Phil, I know you had some camera issues. I feel like, are you back now?
Yeah, I think I'm good.
Okay, go ahead.
So yeah, I wanted to stick with the ACC, Jonathan. A team like Virginia Tech was probably comfortably, looking at an at-large bid like a month ago. And I see you don't have them in currently after their loss, last night. So can you just talk about, I guess, their margin of error or lack thereof the rest of the season and what they'll have to do to get into the tournament?
Yeah, I think with like the ACC in general, some of the bottom teams not really performing all that well in non-conference play. You had obviously, Louisville struggled a little bit. Florida State very much struggled. They were, projected to be a good team. I think you're starting to see having that bottom of the ACC start to beat some, NCAA tournament teams like a Wake Forest, like a Virginia Tech, that you were considering a, potential NCAA tournament team. And Virginia's certainly tripped up a couple games, lost to Boston College. Now that is starting to rear, its ugly head for the ACC in a way, you wouldn't necessarily get, Big 10, Big 12, the ACC having that bad non-conference slate. Now I think could be in a position where it ends up costing each team in the league, if they take those bad losses, a seed or two come Selection Sunday. I think Virginia Tech is an early, team starting to figure that out. And I think, while right now I think the ACC might be in position to get, 6, 7, 8 bids, I think by the end of the season, you'll probably see it be closer to 5 to 7 bids.
Yeah, and staying with the ACC on that point, looking at your most recent bracketology, Duke is an 8 line in the South region, and you have North Carolina as a 9 in the Midwest. Duke had a very nice win last night. Actually, Phil was there live in attendance covering the game for us. But I want to talk more specifically about North Carolina. Not the team so far through the first 2 months of the year I think we all expected. They came in preseason number 1 in the AP and the ECB top 25. I think we expected a lot more out of them. But to date, they look like the team that we saw most of the regular season last year. Not a ton of quality wins themselves, going back to our Kentucky conversation. But you do have them as a 9 seed right now, which means they're safely in and in a fairly good seed, not great, but a fairly good, comfortably in seed. So talk to me a little bit about North Carolina, what you see on the resume and what you think their potential is. What's the highest seed line at the end of the year do you think they can get if they catch fire the last 2 months?
Yeah, I mean, I think if they catch fire, they can get into, a 3 seed, maybe 4 seed. I think it depends how they finish the season. Right now, from a resume perspective, it's just a team. They played one of the most difficult non-conference schedules. They haven't lost any teams that you would, per se are bad losses. They just haven't won those, games against marquee opponents. There's 1-6 in quadrant 1, 1-4 in quadrant 1A, which are the high level games. So they've shown the ability to at least look better than, the perceived notion. Right now, looking at about, in that 25 to 35 ranking in most of the metrics. The key is they just need to start picking up some quality wins. They had an opportunity against Virginia, kind of let that one slide, had an opportunity against Pitt. I think we're looking at North Carolina a lot differently if they pick up 1 or 2 of those games that they end up losing. But I think right now they are still a team, I think, in that 8-9 game for now. But if they go on a little bit of run, pick up a couple quality wins along the way, I think you'll see them, start to move up the seed line and get, to 5 seed or 4 seed or something along those lines.
So basically, even if they do catch fire, nothing higher than max maybe a 3 seed for North Carolina.
Yeah, I could maybe see 2 if, they go without losing the rest of the year. But realistically, I think 3 or 4 is about their ceiling.
Perfect. Phil, I know you want to talk about your Illinois boys.
Yeah, I see you have them as a 10 seed currently. And again, I sort of mentioned it with Virginia Tech, but like, what is the margin for error with Illinois the rest of the way here? Do they have to obviously not run the table, because that would, I would think, improve their standing, but do they have some room for a couple of losses here in a tough Big Ten?
Yeah, I think the Big Ten is showing us kind of in a similar way with both the Big Ten, Big 12 is, I think you can have weeks where you can go 0-2, you can lose 3 straight games, but if you rally and win a few games in a row, which Illinois has done at least recently, you can go from being a team that, the season outlook is, we might miss the NCAA tournament altogether, to very quickly, because how many quality opponents you're going to play on a nightly basis, you can go from, let's say, being a 11 seed to moving up to being like a 6 or a 7 seed. And I think that's kind of the great thing about playing in a league like that is you can, go on a 2-week stretch where you get hot and start beating people. I remember last year with Iowa, they were kind of a team, I think mid-February, most people were considering at least on the bubble, and they finished out February very strong, go and obviously win the Big Ten tournament, and all of a sudden they get a 5 seed. Didn't go amount to anything in the NCAA tournament, but you can certainly rally in a league like the Big Ten to go from being on the bubble picture to being all of a sudden very safe and in position to get a good seed.
So switching gears a little bit away from the power conferences, we have Florida Atlantic sitting at 15-1, and then a team like Charleston sitting at 17-1. Are both of those teams in a situation where they're going to have to either A, run the table and win their conference tournaments to get in, or do they have a little bit of room where they may be able to get an at-large bid as well?
Yeah, I think both teams have kind of established themselves as having a little bit of wiggle room just because of the records. I think Charleston has a little bit less wiggle room just because the CAA is not as good as Conference USA. I think Florida Atlantic can drop a couple games in Conference USA, and they're still going to have a chance at being an at-large team just because Conference USA is right now sitting at being one of the it's not a power conference league, but it's one of the better mid-major leagues out there, whereas the CAA is certainly less competition for Charleston. So I think Charleston probably needs to lose maybe just 1 to 2 more games if you're including the CAA tournament, whereas I think Florida Atlantic could lose 2 games in the regular season, then lose a game in the CUSA tournament and still make the NCAA tournament. I think Florida Atlantic has a little bit better of a resume at this point.
Going back to the Big Ten Conference, one of the favorites to win the Big Ten Conference this year was the Indiana Hoosiers. Right now, they're currently sitting 10-6, 1-4 in Big Ten play. They've lost 5 of the last 7 games, including 3 in a row that they've lost at Iowa by 2 points when they led by like 20 points in the first half. Lost by 1 point at Assembly Hall against Northwestern, and then they just got embarrassed by Penn State on the road at Penn State. What does IU got to do to get into the tournament? Because right now they're in your next 5.
Yeah, I mean, the key is going to be start winning games. I think it's going to be a situation if they're right there on the bubble come Selection Sunday, and they start to look better when Xavier Johnson and Race Thompson hopefully return. I think you could get a situation. We saw this a few years ago with Bonzie Colson missing some games where the committee seemed to value their resume a little bit more just because they took out some of the losses that Notre Dame at that point had because of injuries. I think if Indiana can start to rally, especially when they get Race Thompson, Xavier Johnson back, I think they still can make the NCAA tournament. But the key is obviously you guys start winning games, getting on a little bit of a rally. And right now, looking at their numbers, Indiana is just they're 1-5 in quadrant 1, 2-6 in the first 2 quadrants. So they've beaten the teams they're supposed to win, but you guys start beating some quality opponents, and especially when you're in a league like the Big Ten, it is a gauntlet every night. And while you're going to have opportunities to get those quality wins, the losses can really stack up in a hurry. So I think the key is getting a at least decent record. Maybe for Indiana, it's like 18-14, 19-14 might get them in, but they've got to start rallying some wins.
Yeah, and that Xavier win's holding a lot of weight right now, which is good news we have a large contingent of IU fans. Hoosier Nation shows up big for ECB. So good news for them that Xavier continues to win. And I want to wrap this up real quick because we appreciate your time, and I know we got to get out of here. Speaking of the Big East, just real quick, of the top 4 teams, I just want you to give me your answer between Xavier, Marquette, Providence, UConn. When Selection Sunday rolls around and the brackets are revealed, of those 4 teams, who has the highest seed of those 4 teams?
I certainly think UConn has the biggest advantage just because of what they did in non-conference play. Obviously, getting that neutral court win against Alabama and how dominant they looked in non-conference play. But I think of the other 3 teams, I think Xavier and Marquette are both really rallying to high projected seeds at this point. I think both those teams are looking pretty good. I would lean Xavier as being a little bit higher seed just because I think they've been playing a little bit better as of late. And I think Providence will get a pretty decent seed. I think all 4 of those teams will get single-digit seeds. I would expect Creighton to, right now I have them out. I think eventually they start to turn it and rally a little bit. But out of those 4 teams, I think UConn certainly has the highest potential for seed. Right now they're sitting as a comfortable 2 seed. But certainly I think Xavier and Marquette all can get pretty high seeds as well.
Well, good stuff from Jonathan Warner of MakingTheMadness.com. Jonathan, we appreciate your time. We'll hopefully have to try to get you back on here in a few weeks as we progress throughout the year and get one step closer to March Madness. Go check out the website, MakingTheMadness.com. He does daily bracketology. If you're not following him already, it's at Bracketologist3 on Twitter. Go give him a follow. Good stuff, Jonathan. We appreciate your time, and we'll try to get you back on here in a few weeks as we get closer to March.
All right. Thanks you guys for having me on. Definitely a fun time.
Yep. Take care, man.
We appreciate your time. We'll take a commercial break. When we come back, we got more of episode 130 in college basketball. What's going on, everybody? This is Josh here, and I'm here to let you know that we've teamed up with SeatGeek this season to get you the best deals for tickets to your favorite teams. SeatGeek takes the confusion out of buying tickets, and they are here to give you some great deals. Get in on the fun and head over to SeatGeek, download their app, and use code NCAA Hoops Digest for $20 off of your first purchase.
What's going on, everybody? This is Will Tondo, the co-founder of House Enterprise, and I'm happy to announce that the Everything College Basketball podcast is now part of the House of College Hoops Network. We're really excited to bring you some premier college basketball content this season, so check out the website www.house-enterprise.com for all of our content creators, all of our college hoop stuff, and we're excited to get this season rolling.
What's going on, everybody? This is Conrad here from Everything Pro Wrestling, here to let you know that Everything Pro Wrestling is a show by the fans, for the fans. Every Monday, we are live at 6:05 Eastern Standard Time with Clash of the Podcast, where you can listen to myself and my tag team partner, Sean Hubbard of Hubbard Wrestling Weekly, talk all the latest and greatest in pro wrestling. You might even find an old school topic or two as well mixed in. And every Wednesday, we go live on YouTube once again with AEW Dynamite post-show coverage. So at 10:05, head on over to the Everything Pro Wrestling channel and talk what we just saw on Dynamite with us. And did I mention that we are on all available audio platforms like Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and many more. Thank you so much for listening to me, and let's get back to everything college basketball.
Good stuff from our friend Jonathan Warner at MakingTheMadness.com. Kind of an insight and a look into what goes into a daily bracketology. We heard it last year from our friend of the show and voter in the ECB Top 25, Dan Vasa, but it's nice to hear another point of view from somebody else who does daily bracketology of what goes into not only the teams that are in, the placement, the seeding, and then you also heard from some of our hot button teams that we hear about daily from the ECB family. Indiana, North Carolina, Illinois, Kentucky, etc. Good stuff from Jonathan. Hope to get him back on the show. But let's jump in. Speaking of Kentucky, I feel like, and I feel bad because we lead off, but man, what a roller coaster ride this has been. Without going too much into it, Kentucky takes a terrible loss this last Tuesday at home to the worst team in the SEC, South Carolina. The roof is falling. The sky is falling in Lexington. You seen the guy get kicked out because he had the sign that said, please go to Texas. You've heard all the rumors of dissension. I put a video out on our Facebook group about all the stuff that I've heard to date about the contentious relationship between Coach Cal and the AD Mitch Barnhart. All this got put aside when the Cats went into Knoxville yesterday to play the number 1 ranked defense in college basketball in a place that they have struggled in here as of the last couple years. Thompson-Boling, we know how good Tennessee is and how tough this is. And it made matters worse when before the start of the game, it was revealed that Kentucky would be without their starting point guard, Xavier Wheeler, and sophomore Damian Collins. We said it last week in our predictions. I didn't even ask who was going to win. I asked how bad would Kentucky lose? And all the Cats did for the first time in a long time, they gave Big Blue Nation hope and made it feel like the old Kentucky had arrived. Cats go in lead most of this game despite going down 8-0 early, lead most of this game and come out of Thompson-Boling with a huge 63-56 win. And I say huge because you guys know this means more than anybody can expect. What do we make of Kentucky going into Knoxville and holding Tennessee under 60 points and basically controlling this game from start to finish?
Before I talk about this game, let me just add something real quick. If any Tennessee fan is listening to this podcast and you hopped on Twitter and started saying shit like Kentucky beating y'all, it's basically saying that Tennessee is Kentucky's Final Four. If you say that and you're actually being serious, you're a fucking idiot. Because no, Kentucky beating y'all isn't equivalent to them making the Final Four. Kentucky beating y'all, it doesn't matter if it's in Thompson-Boling or Rupp Arena. Like, that's what they're supposed to do, even on a down year. So, fuck off with all that bullshit. Going into this game, I didn't get to watch first half, but I did watch the second half. Before, the refs, dog shit. Especially in that second half. A lot of non-calls on Placevic. Travel calls.
By the way, real quick. Tennessee just breeds, like, the worst, like, heel wrestling type people on their team. Grant Williams, Uros Placevic, Santiago Vescovi. Why are they put that nasty orange on and they become like the biggest crybabies and cheap shot dirty people in the world of basketball?
Yeah, I don't know. But looking at the stats and when I was watching the second half, it's very easy to see why Kentucky won this game. First of all, they hit free throws. So shocker, they hit free throws. 22 out of 25. That's 88%. And the second reason, probably the main reason they won this game, because they dominated Tennessee on the glass. 43 rebounds to Tennessee's 23. That's a plus 23 margin for Kentucky going into the Wildcats' favor. That's why they won this game. They didn't really shoot the ball well from three, 31.3%. But neither did Tennessee. They was 14.3%. Hats off to Kentucky. You got your best win of the season. And this could be a momentum builder. I'm not ready to say that they're tournament ready, that they're going to go on this big run. I got to see it. They got to be this team a couple more games and be a little bit more consistent, but it's a good start. And boy, oh boy, Kentucky did look a lot better when they didn't have Xavier Wheeler dribbling the air out of the ball every possession.
Yeah, speak on that, Phil. No Xavier Wheeler, and the offense looked a lot better.
Yeah, the offense looked a ton better. You've seen guys moving without the ball better, just quicker decisions passing the ball. Our friend Matt Sack mentioned on a topic you were just talking about that Tennessee's style of defense in this game was basically just foul on every single play because they know the referees can't call it. I mean, there wasn't a single clean Kentucky possession that I seen really. I mean, Tennessee was very physical throughout. And, Peyton mentioned Kentucky hitting their free throws. Kentucky could have been at the free throw line a lot more in this game, to be honest. I mentioned last week I did not predict Kentucky to beat Tennessee, but I thought that Kentucky would play them tough. Just because I did think that, this rivalry game would kind of get Kentucky's blood pumping a little bit. Their season's sort of on the line, and I think we've seen that. But I'm also with Peyton. I'm not ready to say that, they're absolutely 100% going to turn it around and we're going to see the top 5 team we expected now. I need to see it on the floor first for more than one game.
Absolutely. And I don't think any rational BBN member thinks this, but I think it's a good starting point. And the Field of 68 guys mentioned this. Houston's lost Alabama. Alabama going into Houston's the best win we'll see all year in college basketball, more than likely. But this has got to be number 2. And this could be a massive momentum builder and a couple other things rounding this game out. Without Xavier Wheeler, Cal's hand was forced, and Kentucky had no choice but to fight in this game, and fight they did. But the lineup Big Blue Nation has been clamoring for all year had only played 15 possessions the entire season together. Yesterday, they were the lineup that rallied to come back from 8-0 and seal this game. It was Kason Wallace with 2 shooters and Antonio Reeves, CJ Frederick, with Jacob Toppin at the 4, Oscar Tshiebwe at the 5. That's the lineup. That is the lineup. And when that lineup was on the floor yesterday, they outscored Tennessee 29-11. That's the lineup. And if that's the lineup, Cal realizes, I got to play from here on out the majority of the time. Obviously, you're going to have to mix in when Wheeler comes back, mix him in. I think he's got to come off the bench, though. And I got to give shout out to Adu Thiero. He made some mistakes, but he played fearless. This whole Kentucky team battled and fought. This is Kentucky. We've been clamoring for it. This is Kentucky, man. And it was so good to see them back. Defensively, they were outstanding. They fought and battled. Oscar with another double-double, 15 points, 13 rebounds. CJ Frederick hitting shots. He was actually hitting shots in South Carolina game. Maybe we're starting to see the CJ we expected coming over from Iowa. Antonio Reeves, 18 points, leading the way, hitting shots. This is the Kentucky team. So let me ask you this before we move on real quick. If this is Kentucky, let's just say this is the spark that needed. If this is Kentucky, what is your outlook on them now?
If they can play like they did against Tennessee, going at Tennessee out Thompson-Boling Arena, when a place that they've been snake bit in the past, even when they had good teams. Like Josh, you mentioned it, I think about a week, I think it was actually last week when we was previewing this game, you mentioned it, even on good Kentucky teams, the Tally Hero year, Kentucky was really good, top 10 all season long, but when they went at Thompson-Boling Arena, they ended up losing. If they can play like this, then I think they could be a potential. I definitely think they're a tournament team. I think they could potentially get to the Final Four. The next 3 games is pretty favorable. They play at home. They play in Rupp for Georgia, in Rupp for Texas A&M, and then they go on the road against Vanderbilt, and then they get that big Kansas game in Rupp Arena. If they can go 3-0 in those, and then win or lose against Kansas as long as they play well, then this definitely could be the turning point for Kentucky. But like I mentioned earlier, I got to see it more often. They need to be more consistent. And whenever Xavier Wheeler comes back, he's got to learn that he can't dribble the air out of the ball out of possession, that he has to run offense and not stand still. Because if not, then he's potential just not starting the rest of the season.
Yeah, I'm with Peyton. I mean, I think this team obviously has the talent to be beyond a tournament team. I could see them, going into the second weekend of the tournament. I don't think they're a Final Four team still. I just don't think that they have the necessary shooting consistency around, Oscar to spread the floor enough. But I do think that, if they can lock in on defense like this, move the ball as well as they did, obviously hitting your free throws is huge. Like I said, I think they could probably do a Sweet 16 run.
This is Kentucky's first ever road win against a top 5 opponent as an unranked team. Pretty incredible stat. Let's go rapid fire because we got to get to the Rick interview here. Some other big games. Staying in the SEC, we dubbed it as one of the best games all week. Back in midweek, we had Alabama walking in to Bud Walton Arena and putting a smackdown on Arkansas, 84-69. Fellas, I just want to ask you this. We talked a lot last week about Houston, Kansas, best teams in the country. It is damn right time to put Alabama in that atmosphere. Great resume. Great pieces, big, NBA big. They got a playmaker. They got stars. Alabama's the real deal here.
Yeah, man. They're just beating up teams. They just embarrassed LSU in a big rivalry game there last night. Beat them legit by 40 points, which is incredible. Alabama, though, I mean, Braden Miller's the one that's getting most of the love for this Alabama squad, as he should, because he's probably the best freshman in the country. Top 2, definitely. But a guy that people need to keep an eye on is Mark Sears. He had 26 points in this game. 10 of 10 from the free throw line. 4 rebounds, 3 assists. I mean, he played 38 minutes. He's just been so good here lately. He's the one who tore Kentucky up in that game last week or a couple weeks ago. He's so good, and he's so fun to watch. And for Arkansas, man, they really need Nick Smith back immediately if they want to keep this tournament resume going, if they want to change their season.
Yeah, Phil, Arkansas, by the way, too, went to Vandy last night, took another loss. They're currently 1-4 in the SEC.
Yeah, Arkansas 4 losses in a row. But I think that Alabama going into Bud Walton is still an impressive win. But like Peyton said, Arkansas needs Nick Smith back. Alabama's just loaded between Brandon Miller, Javon Quinterly, Mark Sears, Charles Bediako, Noah Clowney. They have a really solid team this year, inside and out. And I think they're one of the best teams in the country, without a doubt.
Speaking of one of the best teams in the country, this was one of the games of the day. And by the way, it's bullshit. The Big 12, big time games like this, you have to go to ESPN Plus to watch it. How are they not on traditional cable? Like, you're telling me ESPN couldn't put this game on? But nonetheless, yesterday in Fog Allen, number 1 in the East to be poll, Kansas 62, number 13 Iowa State 60. Great back and forth game. Another close Kansas win. They've become the king of the close wins right now. Peyton, let me hear your quick thoughts about Kansas's big time win over Iowa State.
Dogfight. That's pretty much sums up this whole game, and it's going to sum up the rest of the Big 12 games because every game is going to be a dogfight just like this one. Grady Dick did what he was supposed to, 21 points. He was a Ken Palm MVP. Bobby Pettiford did well. Kansas, I'm still saying it, best team in the country. Dwan Harris is still even though he had 0 points in this game, his production is just so impressive, and he's still the best point guard in the country for me. Big win, and I'm glad we got it done.
Kansas handles business at the Phog. That's all you can say. I mean, they've done what they've been supposed to do over the past couple of weeks. Been a lot of tight ones. They've been playing with fire a little bit, but winning close games builds great teams. So, said handling their business.
Who didn't handle their business? We talked about it a little bit. We mentioned at the top of the show, Clemson 7-0, big time home win, defeating Duke 72-64. We mentioned Brad Brownell's 400th win at Clemson. Fellas, what do we make of Clemson and Duke? Duke's going to follow the top 25. They do not look good right now.
Yeah, I mean, they obviously missing Roach hurts. They need Jeremy Roach back, but they can't find any consistency offensively outside of Kyle Filipowski, really. When Roach comes back, I think he maybe moves to the 2. You let Proctor run the 1 a little bit more and hope that Roach can provide some of that scoring. But story's really Clemson. I mean, we talked about him earlier, starting off 7-0. See if they can continue that through the end of the season.
How good is Braven Galloway, man? He lit Duke out in
he
this
was
game.
good.
17 points, 4 rebounds, and especially down there in the clutch and late stage of the game, he was just hitting some big shots. PJ All 26 points. I mean, they're 7-0 in conference play. Duke's got to get it figured out. They got to get a little bit better when it comes to scoring, especially down the stretch. But Tyrese Proctor, you missed those couple free throws, and that changed the landscape of the game. Hats off to Clemson.
Clemson looks good. A couple other scoreboard rapid fire real quick. TCU goes in and gives Kansas State their first loss of the Big 12 calendar, beat them 82-68. Great win. I actually think that was at home, but still, you know what I mean. Great win there. You look at Missouri's now lost 3 or 4 after their hot start. They lost to Florida yesterday. Purdue dominates Nebraska Friday. Coach Painter's 400th Big Ten win. And then Indiana, who had been struggling, gets a dominant win against Wisconsin. Wisconsin without Tyler Wall in this game. Lots of shakeups. I think like 8 of the top 25 teams lost yesterday alone. Craziness inside the top 25. I think it's going to continue to be this way. But being this way or not, we're now going to take you to another pre-recorded interview we did on Friday with the Hall of Famer Rick Bozich. Talks a lot about Kentucky, Indiana, and Louisville sports. Some great insight. Appreciate Rick's time. He tucked to us like a fish to water. We do appreciate that. So let's hear from the Hall of Famer Rick Bozich here. Joining us now on the Everything College Basketball episode 130 podcast, he is a sports journalist for WDRB.com out of Louisville. He is a United States Writers Basketball Association Hall of Famer. He is Mr. Rick Bozich. Rick, we appreciate you taking the time with us today, my friend.
Well, thank you for having me on. I enjoyed meeting you guys down at the Bellarmine Liberty game, and I've followed your stuff since then, and I'm always on board to help guys out who love college basketball as much as I do.
Yeah, we mentioned on the show the next night, or the same weekend actually, how incredibly nice you were to us. We were blessed to be sitting next to you, and just how fun is Darius McGee. Before we get anything else, just the pleasure of watching a guy like Darius McGee in person, just unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, he made a couple shots that night are unlike any shots I've seen this year or from many other years. And from what I hear, I wasn't there last night, that Luke Brown from Blackford, and I think it's James Blackman's little brother, went into Freedom Hall last night and hung 18 or 19 threes on Bellarmine. So the rims are very forgiving and welcoming at Freedom Hall.
Yeah, Luke Brown, as most people in the state of Indiana will recall, he was like a cult hero because he played at a smaller high school in the state of Indiana and was scoring a bunch of points. And there was the big deal: could he do it at the college level? He goes to Ball State and then transfers, and this year at Stetson has just been lighting the nets up. You mentioned the Freedom Hall last night. I think I've seen where he hit 6 threes in a row, and his 7th one in a row rimmed in and out. I mean, incredible shooting.
Yeah, I remember when I was in high school, people were posting all kind of message boards, threads about him, as like, why wouldn't Purdue, why wouldn't Indiana, why wouldn't Ball State really recruiting him more? And then, as you mentioned, he was going to go to Ball State, and then he ended up going to Stetson. Then I think he left Stetson once and then went back. And I didn't realize until last night that James Blackman's younger brother is also on the team, and I heard he had a really good game last night. So, it's another indication that high school basketball in Indiana is unlike any place else in the country, and school programs from all across the country come into Indiana to recruit because they're going to get kids, A, that are well coached on the fundamentals, and B, are used to playing in front of big crowds.
Yeah, and the irony of this is that Luke Brown and Jalen Blackman were they're same age, but they were in the school at the same time, and there was this weird competitive rivalry between fans. They were friends, but the fan base was kind of split. You're either Team Blackman or Team Brown, and now they end up on the same team. So I think it's funny how the universe works like that.
For sure. Yeah, Blackman obviously played at Marion for his dad, right?
Yes.
And then
yes,
Luke Brown's over at, is it Hartford? He lives in Hartford City, I think, but the school's actually Blackford, right?
Yes,
which is just north of Muncie. So he's a little bit east of Marion. Different level classifications of schools. They play different level of competition. But I remember when they were young high school players, everybody was touting both of them. It's who's going to be the future Mr. Basketball? And I don't think either one of them got it, right?
No, who did win it that year? I can't off the top of my head remember who won it, but neither one won it.
Caleb first, maybe? I don't know.
I think you might be right. I'd have to go back and check. I can't remember off the top of my head, but Rick, obviously you've covered this sport for a long time now, and your wheelhouse has been in the I heard on Jim Coyle's show the other day, he mentioned the Bermuda Triangle of Indiana, Louisville, Kentucky. Historically, three of the top programs in the sport. And this year, it's such an odd year because neither of the three are very good right now. And so I would like to start, if you don't mind, with Kentucky because they seem to be the flavor of the week nationally right now. Kyle Tucker of The Athletic came out with a pretty damning article, really good article, but pretty damning article detailing a lot of the behind the scenes stuff going on that we don't see on the court action, which we know on court has been pretty bad right now. But the behind the scenes stuff is amazing information between the friction apparently between Coach Cal and the AD Mitch Barnhart, not getting the practice facility despite raising the $30 million. Just a lot going on at the program and none of it positive right now. So what can you tell us about the Kentucky situation as far as you know right now?
Yeah, I mean, this has been going on really for a while, where there's been a little bit of friction there. It kind of escalated during the, I think it was the summer when Kentucky was down in the Bahamas on their summer trip, and Calipari made the comment that Kentucky was a basketball school. And that didn't sit well with Mark Stoops, the football coach, and he made the unusual step of firing back at his own basketball coach on Twitter. And Mitch Barnhart, the athletic director of Kentucky, didn't like that at all. And he held the unusual step of having a press conference where he pretty much called out both coaches and privately called them and told them to knock it off. The latest development today is that Mitch Barnhart called into Matt Jones's radio show on Kentucky Sports Radio and basically addressed all this stuff, saying, do he and Cal not have no relationship? No, that's not true. That he comes in and talks to him, usually after every game. He watches practice. He said it's not like they're close. They don't go out to dinner and hang out and stuff, but it's not like they have no relationship. And he mentioned that, this is all brought on by the losing, which it is. When you start losing, people try to look for reasons that you're losing. And he also mentioned that, he's sure that John Calipari could raise the 30 to 35 million if he needed to, but that it's not as simple a process as just saying, I got the money, let's build a building tomorrow. There are federal guidelines you have to go through. There are Title IX requirements you have to go through, and it would be a while before they could even put a shovel in the ground. But the bottom line takeaway from this is that, there's friction there, and they're not all pulling in the same direction. And now you're really kind of encouraging Kentucky fans to choose sides. Are you on the side of John Calipari to think that he can get it going again? Are you on the side of Mitch Barnhart saying he's the athletic director, he should be in charge? Do you want Cal to stay? Do you think it's time for a new guy? It's year 14. I always tell people the Kentucky basketball job is like the Notre Dame football job. There's a finite number of years you can do the job. And then people they quit looking at all the good things you've done, and they start looking at the things they don't like. And Cal's gone beyond the 10 years, which is usually what the number is. Rick Pitino was there 8 years. I think Tubby was 10. People start getting a little impatient at that time, and with good reason. Kentucky, as everybody knows, last year lost to St. Peter's. The year before they had a losing record. That's not going to fly at Kentucky.
Well, and you mentioned the 10-year mark. If I'm not mistaken, Cal has mentioned in the past that Joe B. Hall, of all people, told him that you have about 10-year window at Kentucky. Anything over that, it's not good. And you mentioned he's in year 14. It's just a wild situation. And to be completely honest, I think we all can agree, if Kentucky was winning, none of this stuff would really matter too much right now. But the fact that they're 10-6. They took a terrible loss to South Carolina, coming off of the heels of getting completely ran off the floor down in Tuscaloosa. Things are not good in Big Blue Nation right now. And then these articles come out, even to the point where I think, and I put a thing on our Facebook today, a little quick video summarizing everything, where coming into yesterday before the article was released by Kyle Tucker, I think the majority of people in Big Blue Nation just solely pointed the finger at Calipari as to why the on-court issues. And I do believe he deserves a big chunk of it. But with this revelation of the Mitch Barnhart denying stuff as much as Cal apparently realizes he needs an offensive coordinator, wants to hire additional support staff. And apparently, if you believe the article, Mitch Barnhart says no to hiring an offensive coordinating coach, a defensive coordinator coach, and a GM, basically, which like the schools like Duke have. So it's a lie. It's never one person or one particular thing. But when you look at this Kentucky team, very much underachieving and underperforming, what do you point out as one of the big things, or maybe multiple things, that's went wrong so far for Kentucky as we sit here on January 13th?
Well, the first thing I'd say is St. Peter's doesn't have an offensive or defensive coordinator or a general manager or a new practice facility, and they did okay. Neither does South Carolina. So I think all this stuff about the practice facility and offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator is just a misdirection play to get the heat away from where it should be, which is on John Calipari. He has made some miscalculations in recruiting and not gotten the guys. He used to get the cream of the crop. He does have the cream of the crop coming in next year, and that's one thing that's out there in the background. But they don't have the best freshman in the country this year. They didn't have the best freshman in the country last year the way he did when he first got started there. Secondly, he's the one who's made the staff decisions that when he, sort of pushed John Robick, who a lot of people think was his X and O's guy.
Oh, he was.
Door. Yeah.
Completely agree. He was.
He doesn't have that now. When he lost Kenny Payne, I think he pretty much encouraged Tony Barbee and what's the guy's name who went? Joel Justice. He went to Arizona State. Now he's at NC State, and he went immediately and hired two guys from Illinois, Chin Coleman and Orlando Antigua. Then he had Jay Lucas in for a brief period of time. He left for Duke. He brought the assistant coach in from Texas. I mean, he's got Bruiser Flynn on the staff. He's got plenty of help. He just doesn't have the right help. He needs to do a better job of getting assistant coaches there who can help him and do a better job of evaluating talent. I mean, I think that, he's got Sheboy, who's the returning National Player of the Year. But, you look at Severe Wheeler, he's a fine player. He's not John Wall. He's not Brandon Knight. He's not Tyler Ulis. He's not those kind of point guards that Kentucky used to have. You look at C.J. Frederick. He's a nice player. When he was at Iowa, he wasn't an all Big Ten type player. To think he's going to come into Kentucky and be Tyler Hero is unrealistic. So they don't have when Cal has really been flying high, he's had lottery picks throughout his whole lineup. He doesn't have that right now, so he's going to have to find other ways to win.
No, and absolutely. And historically, Cal teams, especially on the defensive end, his really good teams have a rim protector. They don't have that this year, which when he has an Anthony Davis or Nerlens Noel or Willie Cauley-Stein, they play under screens, but they're long. Nick Richards is a great example. They play under screens, but they're still long enough to contest shots, and it allows the guards to put a lot of ball pressure on. He doesn't have that. As much as we all love Oscar for his demeanor and what he did last year, he's been exposed defensively this year. Guys like Nate Oates, Dennis Gates, we've seen with Lamont Paris, they are putting Oscar in 1v1 ball situations on ball screening action, and they're exposing Kentucky. Peyton, I know you have some stuff in Louisville here. Unfortunately, I know the Cards aren't doing very well this year, so I'll let you take this part away.
Yeah, that's an understatement. You know, Kentucky's not good this year, but Louisville's just somehow even worse. Yeah, going to Louisville, they're sitting right here on they're 2-15 on the year. They started the first 3 games of the season, they lost all 3 games by 1 point. And if you go to the Virginia game in the ACC tournament, guess what? We lost that game by 1 point too. So that's 4 games in a row we lost by 1 point. And then we go to Maui and get destroyed by Arkansas, get destroyed by Texas Tech, and then get beat up by a rival Cincinnati. Get embarrassed at home to Maryland. This Louisville team, I feel so bad for a guy like Ella Ellis. He's trying his hardest to do what he can for this team. He has to do legit everything. He has to score. He has to distribute. He has to defend. He has to be a leader. He has to help rebound. He has to do everything for this team. And the talent-wise, we just don't got it. Defensively, we're 241st in KenPom defensively, 299th in offensive efficiency. We can't score the ball. We can't stop anybody. Kenny Payne, rough year to his first season as Louisville basketball coach. What's going on down there in Louisville? What type of stuff are you hearing, and what's wrong with this Louisville squad? Why are we so damn bad?
I don't know if we have enough time to go through everything that's wrong. I mean, the first thing I'll say is they are getting better, and I know that fans usually don't want to hear that. They want to hear when are they going to win games, when are they going to get better recruits in. They have improved. Ella Ellis has been solid, as you mentioned, all year. He's kind of got the warrior mentality. He's the guy that does bring the fight every night. But Mike James, coming off of Freshman of the Week year in the ACC and had a solid game against Clemson, he's definitely taken a step forward. What they need to do, I think they need to get a really good 3-man. Maybe it'll be Kamari Lands. I don't know. He's got to be more consistent. But you have the 3 big guys who really, the issue is that their skill set is all pretty much the same. And Jalen Withers, Brandon Huntley-Hatfield, and Sidney Curry, they're not guys who can really play out on the floor. They're all really 5 men. And Curry hasn't been in shape for a lot of the year. Brandon Huntley-Hatfield, I think, is learning to become more of a post-type player. And Jalen Withers, to me, he's been the most puzzling of the inside players, because as a freshman, I thought he was pretty good in the post. Last year, he moved out to the wing under Chris Mack, and that wasn't his forte. And this year, he still kind of floats out there at times. And even Kenny Payne's gotten frustrated with him and began not starting him and starting Kamari Lands instead. So, what they have to hope for, is just to continue to show incremental improvement. I think they've won more fans back on their side with playing better defense and having more hustle. I don't know how many of the home games you guys have been to, but the atmosphere in the last 2 home games against Wake Forest and Syracuse was much better. They got the crowd engaged, and they got Carolina tomorrow on Saturday. Carolina they played this weekend. Armando Bacot is not going to play in that game, so that gives them a chance. And then after the season's over, they have to be aggressive and very determined to get at least 2 and maybe 3 guards or wing players out of the portal, because they need immediate help, and they can offer plenty of playing time.
Real quick, Josh.
Oh, go ahead.
Real quick. You mentioned Sidney Curry. I want to talk to him. I talked about him
Sure.
real quick. Last year, second half of the year, this dude was looking like an all ACC type
Right.
guy. And to start the year off, he just looks like a shell of himself. You mentioned he's not in shape. What's the deal with him? Is he just not gelling well? Or is it just it comes to that he's just not in shape, like you mentioned?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for us to understand how a college basketball player at the Power 5 level could allow himself to come into the season and not be in shape. So that has been that's been a confusing thing for a lot of people to understand. Kenny Payne's been on him. He even came up with a diet for him to be on, calls him at 1:30 in the morning many nights to make sure that he's staying on the diet and is trying to work with him. It's just been a tough road for Sidney Curry for a lot of reasons. And I thought he kind of turned the corner there maybe like 2 weeks ago. He had a couple of really good games back to back, but then he's not really continued to push forward on it. So, last year he finished strong. Maybe this year he's a second half of the season type guy, but he's an undersized post player. He doesn't have tremendous lift, so he's going to have to beat you with muscle and with energy. And when he's carrying an extra 15 or 20 pounds, he's just making it really hard for himself because, as you know, at the ACC level, the dudes that play inside are going to be bigger and quicker and stronger than him.
And they have bigs in that conference that run the floor really well, a
Yes,
la
they do.
North Carolina.
Yes,
The
they do.
last couple things for you, because we appreciate your time and want to be cognizant of that. The last
Okay.
thing on Louisville I want to ask, because Peyton included, a lot of the Louisville fans that we have in our group that we talk to on our Twitter and in games, the two biggest frustrations I think from them that we hear about Louisville is one, dealing with Kenny Payne. And I want to ask you, without putting you in a weird spot, is his demeanor on the sideline. I know it's his first year as an actual head coach running a program. Things aren't going well, but I think of the Louisville fans that we talk to are frustrated because when they are not winning, and especially in games where they're getting blown out in some of those early games, his demeanor just looks like so cavalier. He's kind of crossed his arms on the sideline. No fire, no passion is the words that we continue to hear. So one on Kenny Payne, do you think it's just an adjustment from assistant coach to being a first-time head coach? And then the second part is in the recruiting trail. I think a lot of people around the country, when Kenny Payne took the job and he brought in a guy like Nolan Smith, a known big-time recruiter, the fact that they've swung and missed on so many high-level prospects, like an A.J. Johnson, like others, the fact that recruiting's not even going well, I think those are the two biggest points of frustration amongst Louisville fans in which we interact with.
Yeah, the first one is in terms of his demeanor. I mean, I've known Kenny Payne since he was a freshman at U of L. I got to know him even better when he came back to U of L like 20 years ago to get his degree. He's got fire. He's got determination. I've been to a couple practices this year. They routinely go 3 hours, and he's hard on those dudes. But I think he also is one, he's aware of the modern player and how they need to be coached, and guys don't respond as well as they used to somebody always being on them and criticizing him. And I think he feels like these guys were beat down under the previous coaching staff, and he's got to sort of build them back up mentally to move forward. And I know that it does bug some fans, but trust me, he's hard on them and he works them hard. And I think he's realistic in terms of what he can get out of them and what, and how to do it. So I think be patient with that. And the fact that he has such great relationships with Anthony Davis, Carl Anthony Towns, Julius Randle, all these dudes, they trust him. And sometimes they come and work out with him in the summertime because they like him so much that I think when he gets the right guys in, you'll see better results. And the second thing is the recruiting. It's a fair question. I think I know for a fact, people only talk about two guys. It was the kid from Iowa State who went to Texas, and the kid from, I think, Chattanooga who went maybe to Gonzaga.
Yeah, Tyrese Hunter and Malachi Smith.
Right. They went hard for both of those guys, didn't get either one. There were three other portal guys that they went after that didn't get. I think the primary reason for a lot of that was the fact that schools were negative recruiting against them, that they were going to get the death penalty from the IARP. I know that since then they lost Anthony Johnson and some of these guys, but I think we'll see a different result from the portal after this season. And I think you'll see them have more success this summer with high school guys. And they know they have to do better. I mean, they're very aware. There's Nolan Smith and Danny Manning and Josh Jameson and Kenny Payne are more frustrated than any Louisville fan is over the way it's gone. And they know, that they know the way it works at this level. They've all been at this level. They played and coached at this level, and they know what they have to do, and I think they'll do it.
Real quick, last question about Louisville, and Josh
Sure.
will transition to another team. Is Louisville? Are we planning on honoring the 2013 National Championship squad February 18th against Clemson? Because I've been hearing about it. I think Louisville Twitter posted something about it. And I know it's going to be like a 10-year anniversary since we won the national title. You can take away our banner, you can't take away my memory. I remember watching that game. Beat Michigan.
Yeah, Montrezl Harrell's tweeted about it. Actually, Eric Crawford has a column up at WDRB about that and how Louisville is walking a fine line between remembering what the events of 2013 and actually honoring the team. So I don't know what they can or can't do. I mean, they have to. I think they don't want to thumb their nose at the NCAA, but they also know that fans want to embrace that team and those players deserve to be embraced. So, yeah, I think there will be some kind of recognition of those guys.
Well, I mean,
try my hardest to be there.
Well,
All right.
I mean, you can. I mean, Bill Self, remember a couple years ago, he was under a cloud of investigations and had the dancers at the Midnight Madness. I mean, it worked out for Bill Self. So, but transitioning to the last part of the Bermuda Triangle, as our friend Jim Coyle liked to say, let's talk Indiana real quick to round this out. We had them in our ECB preseason top 25 magazine. We had them as the Big Ten favorites, as did a lot of publications. And they start off a great win against Xavier. It's looking better by the day. They have the good win at home against North Carolina. And since then, I know the injuries, but they've fallen off a cliff. And more so, which is the weird part about it, the one area that we thought would carry them, their defense, they are giving up a ton of points here lately. Is it just as simple as the injuries, like to Xavier Johnson and I forgot the kid's name now. Race Thompson. Thank you. Escaped my mind. Is it just as simple as losing those two guys have really derailed them, or is there something more to it?
Yeah, I mean, no, it's not just as simple as that. That's definitely a factor. You take away starting point guard or the veteran point guard and a 6-year power forward from most teams, they're not going to be as good, but they should be better than they are. I mean, they had Iowa down by 21 points and lost that game. They fell behind Northwestern 34-17 at home. That shouldn't happen. They gave up 18 3-pointers against Penn State with the guys they have on that team. That shouldn't happen. So they've lost their mojo on defense for sure. In the last 5 losses, they've given up 40 or more points in 9 out of 10 halves. That shouldn't happen. So the defense, the coaching staff there needs to figure it out, and they need to figure it out real quick. I mean, because the Big Ten, I think they're tied for last right now with Minnesota after Minnesota beating Ohio State, and they've played themselves from being a 3 or 4 seed into probably right now they're already a bubble team again. And you know, you live in Southern Indiana, you know the fan base is howling. They don't understand it. They're not going to accept it. And so, you know, every team in the Big Ten is going to have a stretch where they get knocked down. But what you can't do is you can't, lose home games, and they did lose one to Northwestern. And when you have a 2 or 3 game losing streak, you can't let it become a 5 or 6 or whatever it was that one year when Romeo played, a 9 game losing streak.
Yeah,
you have to have a game where you have a dude on your team, whether it's Trace Jackson Davis or Jalen Hood-Schifino or Trey Galloway or whoever, says, you know, this stops today. We're going to guard people. We're going to make the stops we need to make. We're going to take care of the ball and win the game. So we'll see. We'll see what they're made of. I know that the one thing that I've noticed this year is like the IU players are engaging with fans. I think on social media they've been critical. I mean, stop wasting energy on that stuff and concentrate on guarding your man and do what you need to do to win games. You're not going to win the battle on social media in the first place. And secondly, it doesn't help you win games. So when people tell you you're great on social media, it's meaningless. And when they tell you you stink on social media, it's meaningless. Tune it out. I mean, I'm stunned at how much time they take fighting with people on social media. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it seems like they've completely lost sight of things, because you mentioned, I think it was Barstool IU on Instagram posted something that basically they're not playing well, to sum it up. And every player, Miller Kopp and et cetera, got on there and was like, all right. And I'm like, do you really need to do that?
Well, show people on the court. The thing is about Miller Kopp, I mean, he thought it was cute earlier in the year to like give players these words. He wanted to them to bring into press conferences and show how creative they could be. All that stuff is irrelevant. All you're going to be remembered by is, did you win games? Did you make the NCAA tournament? Did you win a Big Ten championship? I think he miscalculates the appreciation that Indiana fans have for winning basketball, sound fundamental basketball, and good defensive basketball. They don't care about your TikTok account. They care about, are you guarding your man? That's what they care about. And I was up in Indiana this week for the women's game when they played against Maryland, and that team has set an example for how the men's team needs to play is, A, they guard people, and B, when Maryland, which is a top 10 team, made a big run at them, they held their ground. They let them tie the game at 50, and they scored the next 7 or 9 points of the game, and they won the game and engaged the crowd back into it. The fans want to be on their side, but they're not going to ever cheer for what they view as sloppy or inconsistent basketball. They're not.
No,
Yeah,
and it goes back. Go ahead, Peyton, real quick.
To talk about that game, the Maryland Indiana women's game. I heard a story about it in the middle of especially late stages of the game, the second half, that or the fourth quarter, that one of the players from Maryland, I don't know what her name was, told Mackenzie Holmes on like a free throw or something, like, this place is loud, like it is loud right now, like it's deafening, like you can't hear anything. And Mackenzie Holmes is like, yeah, like these fans are engaged, and when they're engaged, they're one of the best. It's one of the toughest environments to play in college basketball. Period.
Yeah, she told her, you have great fans, they understand basketball, and they do. I mean, they do understand basketball.
Yeah, and it goes back to our earlier point about Indiana. I mean, it's basketball in 49 other states, but Indiana, it's different. The last point of Indiana too, besides the defense, and we talk about it, live ball turnover. It's not just turnovers, because when I coach and when I played back in high school, we were taught, we don't want you to turn the ball over, but if you're going to, throw that son of a gun in the 30th row. That way you can play set defense. Indiana, you go back to the Kansas game, 23 turnovers, 17 steals, pretty much not a lot of them forced, just lazy passes that ran to Kansas runouts. Continuing live ball turnovers because of sloppy, ill-timed passes. Just, I don't get it. Indiana does not, same way with Kentucky. They are in similar boats. Neither team looks good, and neither team particularly looks like a tournament team right now, which leads me to my last question before we let you go. It's January 13th right now. 2 months from now, when the Selection Sunday comes out, is Kentucky and Indiana either one in the tournament, both in the tournament, or none in the tournament?
I'm going to say Kentucky's going to turn it around and make the field. I think they'll pull out. I don't think that they're going to win the SEC or anything like that, but I think they'll turn it around enough where they will make the field. They won't be a very, very high seed. Indiana, because of the unavailability of Xavier Johnson and the uncertainty about Race Thompson's return, and my lack of belief that the defensive collapse has been so significant that I don't think they're going to make the tournament. No. Well,
there you have it. Words from a Hall of Famer. Rick, we appreciate your time. Like I said, It was good. It was good getting to meet you. And we hope to hopefully before the end of the season get you back on if your schedule frees up.
Sure. We can do it before the tournament, maybe. All right.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Right. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Rick Bozich, thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me.
We appreciate you, sir.
All right.
Well, there you hear it. The Hall of Famer himself, Mr. Rick Bozich. Great insights. Phil, I know you weren't able to make it because you were ill that day, but good stuff from Rick.
Yeah, sounds like you guys had a great time. He was super gracious with his time, obviously. Gave us some great stuff about the, as you guys referred to it, the Bermuda Triangle of school, Kentucky, Louisville, and Indiana there. So yeah, definitely some great stuff.
Good stuff from Rick. We were planning to get him back on, but joining us now, Phil, I will let you take this intro over.
Yeah, joining us now in episode 130 is the owner and founder of Haslametrics.com, analytics expert Eric Haslam. Thanks for joining us today, Eric.
Hey, no problem. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So just to start off, for some of the people who maybe aren't as familiar with Haslametrics, just give us a brief explanation of maybe some of the things that differentiate your rankings from like KenPom or Torvik or some of the other analytics sites.
Yeah, I would say, it's always never a question I can answer all the way through because I never quite know. They don't really reveal what goes on behind their own curtain, so to speak. But I know that one of the things that makes my stuff a little bit different is it's largely based on shot selection and shot success, and then shot situations as well. So one of the things you look at is, particularly you can get a lot of rich information coming from play-by-play data, like where these shots are coming from on the court. So you break things down into the mid-range and the near proximity and the three-point shot. And then you look at situations, and you think of situations where a team might be more likely to have a higher field goal percentage, thinking second chance putbacks or steals, quick points off of steals. You try to isolate all these individual situations, and then you rate how these teams perform in all these situations, be it shooting from mid-range, scoring off of second chances, things like that. And then you do the same thing on both sides of the ball. You're doing it on the offensive side of the ball, the defensive side of the ball. You're able to break everything up into all these basically matrices of different shot data. And then you just perform all these little transitive comparisons behind the scenes. And that's, there's thousands of those as the season goes along. And that's kind of the meat and potatoes behind Haslametrics.
So then kind of pivoting off that a little bit, I seen UNC is 39th in your rankings versus maybe a little higher in some of the other rankings. What is it about UNC that your, formula is, not liking right now, I guess?
Yeah, that's really a kind of a difficult question to answer because, there's so much, and I have never, when it comes down to a lot of these things, sometimes if I took a real close look at the breakdown of what's going on behind the scenes, I could see what's going on. But my algorithm works in such a way that there's so much going on and there's so many thousands of comparisons. It could be a variety of different things. It could be data. One of the things that my data does that's a little bit different than others is I try to weed out garbage time data. So you guys who follow me on Twitter, they know the whole hashtag analytically final thing. When a game goes analytically final, it means the game is, in theory, mathematically out of reach. I think I've only seen in 9 years twice where a game has gone mathematically or analytically final and the team that was trailing actually won. But if that information, you're only looking at game data before you hit garbage time. And so I weed out all that other garbage. I put a higher premium on recent games. I know other sites will hold on to preseason baseline data long into even January. For me, most of my preseason baseline data has burned off by the time Christmas comes along. I'm more interested in who a team is today. I think a lot of other analytics sites are looking and saying, well, we want to look at who a team is maybe 3 weeks out or over the span of a rolling 6-week period. I'm looking at who they are today. And that's why I put a higher premium. Could be a lot of different things why North Carolina falls below that, but it's really hard for me to say without digging into every single number behind the scenes.
And as you can see, Peyton's pulled up the. Oh, sorry, Phil, but I was going to say, as you can see, Peyton's pulled up the Haslametrics analytical final cheat sheet. He's got that up on the screen for those who are watching us live right now. And Phil, I'll let you get back to yours, but I want to ask him real quick. By the way, Eric, it's good to see you again, my friend. It's been over a year. You hopped on with us last year to explain the whole process, and it's another year that our Packers let us down. But man,
brutal. It's like I can't feel pain any longer. After that 2014 NFC title game against Seattle, that I thought 4th and 26 was bad, and then all of a sudden that happened and made that look like a paper cut. Every year, it's just you go out there, you expect something to for them to pleasantly surprise you, but at the end of the day, it's just another dagger in your back. And I said back in early December, I said, watch, they're going to go 4 and they're going to win all these 4 games. And then I said, it's going to come down to a game against the Lions in Lambeau and we're going to blow it. And I was saying it in jest, and of course it happened. So,
and that's exactly what happened. Phil, I'll let you get back to your point.
Yeah, just what we were talking about, analytically final.
Yeah.
What is the earliest we've seen a game go analytically final so far this season?
Oh, so far this season, I'd have to pull it up, but I know I think there's been 2 games that have gone analytically final in the first half. And that's pretty hard to do because you're talking, as you can see on that chart right there, you got to have a 40-point lead in the first half. And we only do this for games between Division I teams. If you're talking about obviously like James Madison and Valley Forge, if you remember that game, it was a ridiculous score. We don't look at that stuff because Division II teams or Division III teams, whatever you have, they're at a completely different level. So we take those out. So anything we look at is specifically D1 versus D1. I think this season, we've seen it twice. And if I'm not mistaken, the earliest we saw it was, I believe, the very first game of the year, which was Baylor versus Mississippi Valley State. That game went analytically final, I think, somewhere like with about a minute to play in the first half. And I think there's been one other game that's done that.
How early did you go analytically final last night with Alabama's absolute ass whooping of LSU?
Yeah, that one, I actually tweeted that one. I think it was 17 minutes and change, which is pretty crazy. And one of the things I had said at one point, I tweeted out there because I was watching a lot of that game, and late in the first half, I said, the only reason I'm still watching this game right now is out of sheer curiosity to see if Alabama can actually go analytically final on LSU in the first half. I think it would have been the 3rd time this year a team went analytically final in the first half, and they knocked on that door. I think the lead was 37 at the half. So one more 3 falls, you're talking about that would be the 3rd time that happens. But yeah, I think they got there with 17 and change. I think maybe 18 and change. So as a result, the score that Alabama received, I like to give these performances scores, and you can see that on my site. If you click on any of the teams on the far right column in the schedule, you'll see their game efficiency rating. They had a sky high game efficiency rating versus LSU. No surprise. And as a result, Alabama jumped up 4 spots to number 4.
Well, speaking of Alabama, we spent a lot of time talking because it is very fluid this year. There's not a great team per se, but there's a lot of really good teams. So looking at your analytics, what do the analytics tell you are the 4 best teams right now that have the best chance of cutting the nets down?
Well, it's no surprise, I don't think. I think, well, maybe number 1 right now is Houston. I think Houston is, you're looking at a Final Four team from a year ago. I think that's a very quality team. Tennessee, I still am a believer in Tennessee, but that was a weird game yesterday. I did not see that coming. I was joking to a buddy of mine last night. I'm like, yeah, this is total college basketball for you right here, where you actually have Tennessee loses to Kentucky, who had just lost to South Carolina, who lost by 40 to Texas A&M yesterday. I'm like, go figure that one out.
One step further, the week prior, Tennessee goes into South Carolina and drubs them by 40. So it's the
right.
They like the equative properties.
It's that triangle, that makes no sense whatsoever. So Tennessee, I'm still a believer in Tennessee's defense. It just was one of those games where they just did not come to play. Kentucky did come to play. Kentucky shot free throws really, really well. Tennessee couldn't get any shots up close to fall. I know Ziegler had a number of chances at the rim, couldn't convert any of them. But they're still my number 2 right now. Number 3 is UCLA. I'm kind of lukewarm on UCLA right now. I'm not 100% sure I agree with that. But then, like you said, I don't know what team that would rise up to be better than them. A lot of it is kind of, so as far as whether they should be top 5 or not. And then the 4th team I have right now is Alabama. I have kind of hesitated being a believer in Alabama this season because I saw what they did last year. A little bit of that is still left. The taste of that season is in my mouth. They didn't shoot the 3 well. They didn't defend well down the stretch. This year, it's a completely different animal. Alabama fans told me this is not the same team as last year. I believe it. Brandon Miller is a game changer. He's one of those guys like Jalen Suggs for Gonzaga a couple years ago that makes all the difference in the world. I think Alabama is looking like a Final Four team right now.
So speaking on Purdue, though, because I did not hear Purdue in that,
Yeah.
and we're all of the belief that they are still one of the best 4 teams in college basketball right now. So analytically wise, what is it about Purdue right now that they're not in your top 4?
It always comes back to the performances behind the scenes. So I think Alabama or Purdue certainly has a claim to be there, but it's kind of like sometimes you're playing certain teams and you just don't defeat them by the expected margin that you want them to win by. Think of Providence last year when Providence was, I think they were like 24-5 at one point, but the problem was they were beating teams by 2, they were beating teams by 3, like a Butler or a DePaul. In these situations, it's not like Purdue is barely squeaking by a lot of them, but you're looking at the overall efficiency margins. And if the efficiency margins are not always there, bringing you up to a top 5 level, it's just what it is. It's how it's evaluating you. This algorithm really knows nothing about all these teams coming into the season, and based on those efficiency margins, that's really all it has to make these decisions. Now, that's not to say that they could go out there and tomorrow all of a sudden blow up and defeat Michigan State by 30. That would probably put them in the top 5. But as of right now, they sit there at number 7. I'm always skeptical about Purdue, obviously, because Purdue fans are like Packer fans. They know that once the postseason comes, they are snake bitten. And so I like, as a Packer fan, I like to tease Purdue fans on Twitter by saying, hey guys, this is a lock this year. This is Final Four written all over it. Nothing can possibly go wrong. Yeah. And all the Purdue fans come back and they're like, why would you do this to us? And I'm like, I'm kind of evil that way.
Yeah, listen, man.
Well, at least as Packers fans, we've got titles.
Yeah. We do. And I feel bad for them because they had, going back to that game against Virginia a few years ago where they had that game won and Virginia wins that game and sends it to overtime. And that was one of my favorite Purdue teams. I just love Purdue teams in and year out. Their fans are great. I have a lot of rapport with them. It's real fun. I really hope they do well. in all seriousness. And a lot of people would say, well, I'm a Wisconsin guy. I'm a traitor. But no, I actually like Purdue. Purdue is one of my favorite teams to watch year in and year out. So I hope they do well.
Peyton?
Well, Purdue don't have any titles, but this team does have titles. As a matter of fact, they're the reigning defending national champs. I don't know if you can see my hat. I got my Kansas hat on right now. They're ranked 8th in your Haslametrics ratings. What is it about Kansas, and why is there 7 teams just ranked higher than Kansas?
Well, the funny thing about Kansas is, and if you look, like I said, if you go to my site and you can look at the sortable schedule and results looking at Kansas, I think what's happening with Kansas, I think they hovered right around number 5 for about a good month, I want to say. And then all of a sudden they backed off a few spots. The reason for that is the game efficiency ratings in their last 6 for a team that's rated in their current position. So let me explain a little bit more. When you look at that game rating on the far right column of that sortable schedule, that is a game efficiency rating for a team who is in that current position. So Kansas is like, we have them at 8th right now. For a team 8th in the country, there are certain expectations for all of these games. And any game that falls in the red means that Kansas has not met those expectations from an efficiency standpoint. Now, Kansas may have won every single one of these games, but out of the last 6 games they've played, they have failed to meet the expectations 5 times out of the 6. And as a result, that's why you've seen them take a step back from 5th to 8th over that time.
Yeah, at the top of the show, we called them the king of the close wins, which is good because it's going to benefit them in March. But yeah, analytically wise, I'm sure it's not good. Phil, I know you got something else.
Yeah, so before we wrap up here with you, Eric, and we appreciate you being so gracious with your time,
Sure.
what are some of the particular metrics on your site that maybe you look at outside of, the more obvious offensive and defensive efficiency that you've kind of noticed seem to be pretty safe predictors of success when it comes to March and April?
Yeah, when it comes to covering, like, for example, covering the spread, the 2 that I kind of look at are the momentum rating and the away from home rating. And the momentum rating basically looks at those game efficiency ratings and just says, I'm going to take a rolling average of the last 4 to 8 games, and then I'm going to compare it versus the entire season. And the idea behind that is to give you a team that, for whatever reason, is performing well as of late. So I'm guessing Kansas, versus the rest of the season, Kansas's momentum is probably not near the top. When it comes to the away from home rating, I'm looking at those teams that are going to struggle playing on the road. And I just kind of tweeted about that this morning. The Bradley Braves are lost little puppies away from home. And I even have showed everything sorted by game efficiency rating, and everything at home was at the top. Everything on the road or on a neutral site was on the bottom. That's a team that is just, for whatever reason, they go on the road, they go away from home, and they just cannot win games. They cannot perform well. When it comes to covering the spread, I look at those 2. That's momentum and the away from home rating. The other thing you can look at is consistency rating. And you can use that a variety of different ways. I look for consistent teams primarily in an over-under standpoint. So if I'm looking for trying to nail an over-under, and I have 2 teams who are maybe the top 50, within the top 50 of consistency, I'm looking at that from an over-under standpoint, because these are teams that play very close to the expectation time and time again. So those are just little things. Another one behind the scenes that I'm looking at, something called the Paper Tiger Factor, which is looking at all your opponents based on strength. And it kind of gives you an idea who has performed well. They either play up to the level of their opposition or play down to the level of their opposition. And it kind of tries to gauge that. I am not publishing on the website right now, but that's something I may entertain doing in the future.
Well, Eric, we appreciate the time as always. You can find Eric at Haslametrics on Twitter and Haslametrics.com, where his rankings are at. Again, we appreciate the time as always, Eric.
Thanks, guys. Have a great
It
day.
was good seeing you, Eric.
Good seeing you too. Take care.
Go Pack!
Take care.
Go Pack! Go!
Go back.
That's our good friend Eric Haslam from Haslametrics.com. Always a pleasure to have him on with us. I don't know about you two. Every time he's came on, I feel like I learned something completely new about the world of college basketball I did not know prior.
Yeah, I was very interested with that last answer, just when he was talking. I mean, it makes a lot of sense, especially with the consistency factor when it comes to like over-unders, because you can sort of gauge that there's not going to be a lot of fluctuation in the amount of points that team's going to score. So definitely a safer bet that way. But yeah, he is an awesome dude to just like follow on Twitter. He's constantly posting great information. Just a lot of outside the box stuff that you're not going to hear elsewhere.
And it makes sense to his answer, Peyton, of why Purdue and Kansas both are a little lower in his analytics. It's not because they're like bad or he doesn't believe that they're one of the best teams. It's because they are playing so many close games and not living up to like the expectations prior for a team in that position.
Yeah, well, I'm looking at Kansas as their last 6 games. Only one of those last 6 games was in the green that he's mentioned. The green meaning they did what they're supposed to. Red meaning they didn't do what they're supposed to. And that was the game against at West Virginia where we beat them up 76-62. That's the only game that we've been in the green. Last time we've been in the green was the game when we beat up Indiana. So I definitely see his point of view on why that Kansas is ranked 8th and not a little bit higher, not one of those top 5, top 4 teams that he mentioned earlier. But I'm sure you have seen it. You ever seen the meme of when like someone's talking and there's like the person has a confused look on their face and there's a bunch of numbers popping up on the little head. I feel like that was me when he first started talking about all this analytics stuff and what goes in with metrics. I swear to God that was me because I don't want to do his job. I thought I know a little bit about analytics. I don't know half as much, even a quarter of what he knows. So
he's a super intelligent dude, very entertaining, and it doesn't hurt he's a Packers fan. Let's go to team of the week. This last week we had a debate between 2 teams, but ultimately we settled here. Phil, who is the ECB team of the week?
I think we got to go with the Crimson Tide this week. You know, we talked about it with Eric. They almost went analytically final in the first half against a pretty solid LSU team. I'm not ready to say good because we still need to see how SEC play turns out, but they also had the win at Bud Walton on Wednesday night. Doesn't look quite as good now with Arkansas losing 4 in a row, but still a tough environment to go in and win. I think Brandon Miller is one of the best players in the country, not only the best freshman. And Alabama's really looking like a team that can make a deep tournament run right now.
Well, look at their last couple. I mean, slaughtered Kentucky, beat up Arkansas on the road, and beat LSU by 1 million. I mean, they look the part right now. And then the mid-major team of the week, we got to put a disclaimer. You know, anymore over the last decade, they're not technically a mid-major, but the reality is they still play in a quote-unquote mid-major conference. So our mid-major team of the week, St. Mary's, they've been on a roll, top 25 type ball club. We'll give Gonzaga, I'll say it here. We talked about, I think, a little bit last week or the week before. They are going to beat Gonzaga at least once. Gonzaga, again, they scored 115 last night and gave up like 75, 85 points, whatever it was. Gonzaga does not look great. St. Mary's will beat them at least once, but they are a mid-major team of the week.
St. Mary's is the exact type of team that will give Gonzaga problems. You know, one of the best defensive teams in the country.
Absolutely. And they don't mind slowing the game down. They will play late in the shot clock if they have to. They do not mind it.
Yeah, and they're ranked actually 6th in Houselam's Metrics ratings.
So St. Mary's mid-major team of the week. Let's go into some games this week. Tomorrow, keep in mind, tomorrow is Martin Luther King Day. I know certain businesses are off. We always have games through the early evening games. If you remember last year, on this day, we had that great Purdue-Illinois game. Well, tomorrow on Monday, we've got another Purdue game. They're on the road at Michigan State in a Big Ten title tilt potentially. We mentioned earlier, Purdue's 5-1. Michigan State's one of those 4-2 teams. Michigan State can stake a claim at first place, a tie first place, with a win tomorrow at home. Their 7-game win streak was snapped yesterday. What do we think of this clash right here? Purdue on the road at Michigan State. What are we feeling in this one? Somebody?
I gotta go with Purdue here. I think they keep it rolling. You know, Michigan State has some front court size, but I don't think they really have the height that can give Edey problems. I don't necessarily think he has a dominant game, but I think he does enough to get Purdue by him. And Purdue shooting comes in clutch at the end in a close game, and we have a 67-64 victory for the Boilermakers.
What were we talking about earlier? We were talking about home court advantages and how much it means in college basketball. Well, East Lansing is going to be popping in this game because Michigan State, Tom Izzo, they're going to find a way to win this game. Zach Edey's going to do what he does. They're not really going to be able to stop him, but I really like Hargood and everyone else that they got for Michigan State, and I think they're healthy now and they're starting to play well. Michigan State gets the job done, and the upset, they win this game 78-75.
the key for Michigan State, in my opinion, has been the reemergence of Joey Hauser. He's been tremendous the last 3 or 4 weeks. He gives Michigan State something that college basketball has been going to the last couple of years, a stretch big man. If he can hit some shots early, and keep in mind this is a 2:30 p.m. tip time, so it's going to be an early game. If he can hit shots and get Michigan State a little cushion early, I think Michigan State can win this game. But I'm with Phil. I'm going Purdue here. I think Zach Edey is going to be a problem for Michigan State. So, and Fletcher Lawyers continue to shoot the ball well. 27 the other night, lighten the rims up. He hits that game winner at Ohio State last week. I like Purdue in this game. I think it could be an ugly one. So I'm going to say 65-61, the Boilermakers. Let's go to the one I'm really looking forward to on Tuesday night. Number 1, Kansas at number 12, Kansas State. The first of 2 this year. The in-state rivalry. Kansas struggles at Kansas State when they have good teams historically. That place is going to be loud and electric. We know how fun Kansas State backcourt is, and we know how good Kansas is with their own backcourt. Peyton, your thoughts on the Jayhawks going into Kansas State?
Well, if you've been listening, or if you've been keeping up with a certain Twitter page up on Twitter, that they think that Kansas State is the best or the loudest college basketball arena in the state of Kansas, and that just simply isn't true. So I don't get why people would even talk about that. But anyways, it's going to be loud. It's going to be packed. Kansas is coming in town, so it's going to be a big rivalry. And I'm looking forward to it. Kansas State, Keontae Johnson's been playing amazing. Marquise Knoll has really shined throughout this season. Definitely a candidate for Big 12 Player of the Year. It's going to be an interesting game, and I'm excited to watch it.
I think Marquise Knoll has been hearing Peyton on this show for the past few weeks, spouting off about DeJuan Harris being the best point guard in the nation, and he's going to stake his claim to it. And I think Kansas State pulls off the upset victory. I think it's going to be a tight one, though, and I like K-State 80-76.
Yeah, I'm going to double dip because I think Kansas, this is another one. I think they're going to play a close one. But I think this is the one time it's going to backfire because K-State's backcourt is so good and they're electric and they can score. Kansas has to lock in defensively here. Not saying they haven't, but they have to lock in because K-State can get out and run. Jerome Tang has proved at the head coach level he is absolutely tremendous. I love this Kansas State team. I like this Kansas team too. I really do. And by the way, that Twitter page you mentioned that puts out all these ridiculous lists, trying to say this is the second best rivalry in college basketball. Get out of town with that. I'm going Kansas State, and I'm doubling down. I'm getting ahead of myself. This is my bank on it. I'm going K-State won the upset. I like them at home. I think when they return in a couple weeks playing at Kansas, Kansas wins that. I like Kansas State to reel in the Big 12 leaders and make this an incredible race for the best conference in basketball. I'm going K-State. I think it's going to be a high-scoring one because I think Kansas State will not allow it to be a slow-down game. Kansas State wins this game 85-82. Bank on it. Let's go to a couple Saturday games. Number 15, TCU at number 1, Kansas. We're back to the Jayhawks here again in the Big 12. Saturday, inside Fog Allen. TCU's been incredible. Jamie Dixon's been insane. They just beat this Kansas State team we talked about, but you're not winning in the Fog this year. I do think it'll be another close one, but you're not going to win in Fog Allen this year unless you have an incredible performance. Mike Miles will have to have like a 35-piece in this game. I'm going the Jayhawks to defend home court, come back off to the loss to Kansas State, win this one fairly comfortable at the end. I think Kansas wins this one 81-72.
Yeah, I'm with you here, Josh. I can't envision Kansas losing 2 in a row, even though I really, really like this TCU team. So I think Kansas handles business at Fog like usual. And like you said, I think it's actually not a huge victory, but, like a 12 to 15 point margin, something like that.
Josh, you've been talking about on our group chat about how you want to see Kansas beat a good team and beat them pretty handily. This is going to be the game where they do so. In Fog Allen, Kansas beats them 10+.
Fair enough. And let's go to Saturday night, the Pac-12. These rankings are going to change because Arizona lost to Oregon last night. Arizona has not looked good in conference play after looking like world-beating title contending team in the non-con with huge wins, winning the Maui, dominating Indiana, beating up, Tennessee at home. Number 6 UCLA at number 8 Arizona. Phil, UCLA is on the rise. Arizona's slipping in Pac-12 play. Is this a get-right game for Arizona?
Arizona's backcourt, as much as we raved about them early in the season, has really just taken a step back since Pac-12 play started. Kirk Kriisa has not been very good. Courtney Ramey hasn't been the same player he was early in the season. Pele Larson has just completely disappeared for this team. They can't completely rely on the front court to carry them, as good as that front court is. I think this is the game, though, that their backcourt finds themselves again, get fired up for a big-time Pac-12 rivalry game. And I think Arizona handles UCLA and makes a statement for the rest of the nation, 90-75.
Since
Ooh, okay.
UCLA lost both games in Vegas early in the season in that main event tournament, losing to Illinois and then losing to Baylor, they've won a 13-game winning streak. Matter of fact, it's the nation's third longest active win streak in the country. That's not going to stop. Thursday, they do play Arizona State, so they get 2 tough road games. They're going to beat Arizona State on Thursday, and then they're going to beat Arizona Saturday. Really like this UCLA squad. They're Final Four contenders, and there's a reason why we predicted them to win the conference this year. So they get the job done, take down Arizona, and take down the Wildcats on the road.
I think Arizona primarily has been, well, I mean, I guess I could say that because they struggled at home against Washington, but I think this is one of those big games that's going to be a primetime game Saturday. The building's going to be rocking. I think Arizona's slight favorite here, but Phil, I'm with you. Their backcourt's not been great in Pac-12 play. Kirk Kriisa has to get back to talking a lot of shit, hitting threes. Courtney Ramey's got to start hitting some more. Their three-point shooting's got to be a lot better like it was in the non-con because they've got the big boys down low, Omar Ballo and Azuolas Tubelis. They are going to do their thing, but the backcourt has to help them out. I think this is a game, a get-right game, as I mentioned. I think Arizona wins. He's going to muck this up and make it ugly, defensive grind, but I think Arizona's front court shines through in this game despite potential shaky backcourt play. I like Arizona to win this game. 72-69, close one. Wrapping this up, you guys already heard my bank on it. I've got K-State beating Kansas. And I need to put a disclaimer. I wrote down Kansas State takes down Kansas by 10 plus. I think they control in this game. So that's my bank on it. What's your guys's?
Phil, go ahead. Floor's yours.
My bank on it kind of goes along with one of my shout outs for this week, but Aiden Mahaney from St. Mary's has been going off, had 25 and 21 in his last 2 games, and I think he continues and goes for 20 plus in both of their games this upcoming week.
By the way, real quick, Phil, got to give you a shout out. We had a dueling bank on it this last week, and you beat me in that one, a game that you were there covering. Duke beat Pittsburgh, so congratulations on that one.
Let's go.
Well, I have another duel because if you guys been paying attention to the show when we was talking about Kansas State, you probably should realize that I did not give a prediction for that game. Well, I'm about to give a prediction for it this week or right now, and it's not just this game; it's the TCU game as well. Because Kansas sweeps the week, goes 2-0 this week. They beat Kansas State at Kansas State on a Tuesday night, showing them who's their daddy, like we have all season long and for the last fucking decade plus. Matter of fact, last year when this game was at Kansas State, they led 50-34 going into the second half. Guess what? Kansas came back and beat them by 3 points. Kansas gets your job done, knocks off Kansas State Tuesday night. That's one bank on it. The other bank on it, I kind of mentioned it, but I'm going to double down anyways. Kansas takes down TCU, takes down the Horned Frogs Saturday night in Fog Allen. They win the game by 15 points or more. Kansas gets the job done and shows why they're the best team in the country. And if they do that, if they go 2-0 this week, they will be our team of the week next week. Because this is one of the teams that we were debating on that Josh mentioned earlier when we were talking about Alabama. This is one of the teams that we was debating on. If they go 2-0 this week, expect them to be the team of the week for next week. But
yeah, and I don't
Jayhawk, bank on it.
Yeah, and I don't think there's any question about that if they go 2-0 against 2 very, very tough opponents. Rounding this thing out, shout outs. I'll go mine real quick. After all the shit that they've got, rightfully so, I've got to shout out the combination of CJ Frederick, Antonio Reeves. 13 points, 18 points respectively against Tennessee. Frederick shot the ball a little better in the loss against South Carolina. These two are going to be huge pieces if Kentucky can turn this season around. Shout out to the shooting, sniping pair from the Kentucky Wildcats. How about our guy Antoine Davis? We've talked about him for 4 years now. Not only did he become the number 4 in the all-time scoring list in the NCAA history this last week, but he became the all-time three-point king, hit his 510th yesterday in a win. Antoine Davis, he is that dude. And shout out Oregon, one of the more disappointing teams in the country, not very good, but they held home court yesterday to take down Arizona in a Pac-12 tilt. So at least they got something to be proud about right now out in Eugene, Oregon.
Some good shout-outs. I'll go ahead and go with my 3 shout-outs. I'm going to shout out 3 different teams here. First team on the docket, let's shout out the Clemson Tigers for knocking off Duke, a top 25 matchup in their home building. Incredible game, fun little the couple last minutes of the game when they finally put it together and started stretching it out a little bit. Big win for Bunnell, and Braven Galloway is a fantastic player, and I love watching him. He continues to get better and better each every game. So shout out to Clemson for getting a big win. 7-0 in conference play. They lead the ACC conference. Next shout out to a team that's legit playing right now. Marquette. Marquette's really right now is tied 63-63 with a top 12, the number 12 team in the country, Xavier with 9:16 to go. But that's not the reason I'm shouting them out. I'm shouting them out because they knocked off Connecticut earlier this week. I don't remember what the final score was, but I know they knocked them off, and that's a big win for them. And Shaka Smart continues to show why he's a great coach. So shout out to Marquette and Shaka Smart. Last shout out. I'm surprised he ain't on the show because last week I shouted him out. This week I'm going to shout out his team. Shout out to the Indiana Hoosiers. They got a big win after losing the last, 3 of the last 5. I forgot what I said. They lost a lot of games in the past 7 games. But they got a big win. They knocked off Wisconsin, beat them pretty handily, beat the brakes off of Wisconsin. And shout out to them because now they're starting to get momentum and they're starting to play well. They just need to get healthy. And if they get healthy, then they're for sure a tournament team for me.
Well, like I said, my bank on it kind of went with one of my shout-outs. So shout out to Aiden Mahaney, freshman out of St. Mary's. He's averaging 15 points a game on the year. This was not really expected. He was expected to contribute, but not to this level. I don't think you can mention best freshman in the country so far this year without his name coming up. And like I said, he had 21 points and 25 points in his 2 games this week. Just been shooting the lights out. Expect him to continue to have a big season. And then my second shout-out goes to DJ Burns of NC State. The game against Miami on Saturday was a big game for him. They were giving away his glasses before the game to the first 500 people who showed up. The NC State fans and students love the guy. And then he goes out there and has 13 points, 9 boards, and 7 assists, a steal, and 2 blocks. I mean, just filled the fucking stat sheet up. Super fun guy to watch. Like I said, obviously his teammates, fans, everybody loves him. So happy to see him have a big game on his day.
The Pack might be ranked tomorrow.
I mean, it's hard to keep them out at this point. They had the big win over Duke last week. They should have 2 wins over Miami at this point. They're starting to put together a nice little resume.
Absolutely. Did you have another shout out? I didn't mean to interrupt you there.
Nope. No, those were my 2 for the week.
Okay, and here's a side shout out to all of our guests today. Jonathan Warner of MakingTheMadness.com. Great kid, man, knows his stuff. The Hall of Famer, Rick Bozich. It's always nice to have, and he said some kind words to us on DM on our Twitter page, which it's always nice to have a guy like that in your corner. And then our friend Eric Haslam from HaslamMetrics.com. 3 incredible guests. I know today's show's longer, but when you have those 3 guests on, man, you just got to roll with the punches, and we're very grateful for those 3 guys. Last thing before we wrap up, today, as we sit here on Sunday, big time 2024 5-star kid, Ian Jackson, is apparently making his college choice. Does he go to Kentucky, Peyton and Phil?
That's what all the crystal balls seem to think, and I don't have any information that says any different, so I think he's a Wildcat.
Well, he's a Wildcat for now, but if Cal goes to Texas, and he might be switching to Texas or going somewhere else, but I think he's a Wildcat for now.
So we'll keep an eye on that. A lot of good stuff, man. Again, shout out to all of our 3 guests today. Good stuff. A lot of great college basketball. It's Martin Luther King Jr. Day, so keep in remembrance of that. Purdue and Michigan State playing an early game, 2:30 tomorrow. We'll have a live coverage from that, as always. Go follow the Twitter page at ECB Podcast 10. The YouTube channel, go hit a subscribe on that. And obviously, if you're not part of the Facebook group, go now. It's just go to the search bar and Facebook, Everything College Basketball. We got all the good stuff there. But wrapping up episode 130 of the Everything College Basketball podcast, for Peyton, for Phil, I'm, of course, your host, Josh Burton. We hope you guys enjoy this episode, and we will catch you next week with episode 131 with more of the college basketball world. Until then, we hope you guys have a great rest of your weekend, and we will catch you down the road.